Have you ever looked at an artwork and was instantly turned off by it? Whether it is a piece of painting, a video game, or a scene in a movie, something about it just doesn't look appealing, but you cannot explain why. Most of the time, it's because it doesn't meet the design principles. Creating a digital art is more than just using software programs. It's understanding what makes something aesthetically pleasing. Having knowledge of the principles of design will guide you to creating art that is gratifying to the human eye. So, what are the 6 principles of design? Emphasis, asymmetry, balance, repetition, contrast, and proportion. Emphasis. This is the part of the design that catches the viewer's attention. This is the very first thing that you see when you look at an artwork. This is also known as the focal point. It can be the result of difference in size, color, texture, and or shape. Let's look at some artwork here. So you see Superman. When you look at this photo, what is the very first thing that you see on this picture here? The very first thing is going to be this S on his chest. This is very, very noticeable. And this here is apparent because of the size, but also of the color. You can see that the brightest thing here is going to be yellow, which makes it stand out. And it really brings out the letter S. In which if you have a darker tone, which is the red, and then you have a lighter background, then the darker tone here, you can see that it really stands out. So in this design, the S is eye-catching. And let's look at Iron Man. This here, you can see the very first thing is going to be chest light. Let me just draw it here. See this light in the middle of his chest. And this really stands out because, of course, it's really bright. It's the brightest thing that you see along with the eyes. But since this is larger than the eyes, then our eyes are drawn upon the chest area. And it's also at the center. So you have to also look at the placement. The placement is also what's going to draw the viewer's eye to that particular thing that you want them to look at. And let's look at an environment here. If you look at this environment, your eyes would probably be drawn. The first thing that you will probably be looking at is going to be the entrance of the building. You can't help but look at this area because you have this here is really bright compared to the other areas. It's surrounded by darkness here, and then right in the middle, all of a sudden we have this nice bright specific area that our eyes will be influenced by. Now, if you just imagine if we don't have a light here, we don't have the lights here at the entrance, and maybe the colors are just going to be as the same value as this area here, how is that going to look like? So let's do a little playing around here. If I kind of color this out, so this is going to be just as dark as the other parts here of the building. Okay, so if this is just as dark as everything else, then this is no longer going to be the focal point. But since the artist wanted to lead our eyes, which is probably the most important part of the scene, which is the entrance, maybe the artist, maybe the intention as it relates to the game. The purpose of this is to have during the gameplay, to have Kratos. If you play God of War, that's of course the main character of the game. Kratos gonna go walk up to the steps and then up to the entrance and to just explore this building. And so this when you're creating a game, an environment, you want to have your viewer's eye also to just kind of lead them to the place where you want them to focus on. In this case, this right here. Okay, next up is going to be this game by Bungie, Destiny. You can see there, our eyes cannot help but look at the most important aspect. It's going to be this right here. Yeah, right there. It's really bright. It's almost at the center, not quite, but almost. Something like this where we have obvious variance of values. You can see in this painting that there is mid-tone colors here, mid-tone values. We got darker tone, which is the dark areas here, and then the lightest tone is going to be here. That really allow us, our eyes, our human eye, to be directed to the most important part of the scene. And so when you're doing an environment, you have to think about also what is going to be the most essential element in the scene that you really want to take your time on, you want to define. That's the part where you are going to spend a lot of time implementing those details. And you want to really make it look good. And then how can you draw the viewer's eye on there? It could be due to texture, size, placement, values of that specific object. So this is what emphasis is. It's the very first thing that our eye is gravitated towards to, whether it's a painting, sculpture, whether it's a video game scene, whether it's a character. Focal point is a very significant aspect that will truly add interest to your work. Asymmetry. This is when two sides are not completely identical. It provides more interest to the art piece and offers more visual variety. Okay, so if we look at Deadpool here, we could see that he has this strap. Instantly, we could see that this is not 100% the same on both sides of his costume. And we could see from here, the belt on this part of his arm and the belt on this arm, the placement is not 100% identical either. So this could be a little higher and maybe it's a little bit more rotated, and this is a little lower. It's very subtle, but it's there. So really, the part of this part here is not 100% the same as this part there. So the concept design for Deadpool's outfit is asymmetrical. You can even see it on the straps here. And also you can see that even the dirt is not 100% the same. This could have a little bit more dirt than this part of the knee pad. And then you could also see that we have a little prop here, and we don't really have the prop on this side. And then although we have the gun holder on both sides, they're not really placed in the same area. So this is what's really going to provide interest to your character, creating asymmetry like this. Whether even when you are maybe modeling or drawing a character on a piece of paper, if you want to make your character a little bit more appealing, maybe on one side of your character's body you're going to add a tattoo, and then on the other side you're not going to have a tattoo there, and maybe one side of the character you're going to have like scratches, maybe he's been to battles, maybe that side is going to have a little bit more injury and the other side not as much. So that will give a lot more vitality to your character, and it can be applied not just to just the model itself, but also to the costume. Maybe the colors could be not 100% the same on both sides, maybe the texture, the dirt. So with this type of principle, you could add variance to your work just by adding asymmetrical parts. Let's check out another character here, Kratos. You could see, looking at Kratos, he has tattoo. Let's see here. Yeah, so looking at Kratos here, let me just change my color. This right here, he has a tattoo on this side. And then on this side of his body, we could see that he has some injury, some scar on this side of his face, and we don't see it on the other side. And we could see also another thing. We have the armor here, but we don't really have the armor on the other side. And if you look at his lower leg area, we could see that there's a chain wrapped around this part of his pad, on his shin pad, but right around here we don't see that same chain. And also the chain here on his arm is not 100% the same the way it's placed. Yeah, it could be a little bit more difficult to see, but just imagining as an artist, you're not really gonna have, like in real life, if you have something like this where you have the chain wrapped around your wrist like this, it's not gonna be 100% the same the way you place it. And so you have to implement the same thing when you're drawing a character or when you're modeling a character. So yeah, creating asymmetry provides a visual interest within a work of art or design, plus it gives the artist a greater range of freedom in his or her design. Balance. This is the distribution of weight of objects, colors, or texture. When we have balance in our artwork, it is more pleasing to the eye. Humans are bilateral after all. Okay, so looking at this orc here, we have definitely see that we have the armor here, okay? And we also have an armor here. Now, this part would be too heavy if we don't have an armor on the other side that would balance everything. So we have this bigger armor, is like really sharp and it's protruding out, and we also have this sharpness going on, but it's not as extending as the one on this left side, which is fine because if you look here, we do have two of the armors here, which makes this part pretty heavy. So even though we have just one armor here, this is a pretty big armor that kind of balance everything out. All right, so we have two, maybe medium size, and then we got larger armor here with something sharp is really sticking out. So that will provide it balance so that this piece will look more stable. It's more comfortable to look at. And if we also look here, we have armor here and armor there, and they are basically the same size. One is not bigger than the other, which is providing it balance. And we also have the chain going around, and they're just the same size. But if you look at this piece here, not only is this artwork providing balance, it's also asymmetrical. It is also applying another principle of design, which is asymmetry. Now, do keep in mind, an artwork could be using not just one, it could be using 5 principles of design, it could be using 3 of the principles of design. But if you're looking at artwork, you have to study the art itself and try to identify which principles are being used, all right? So not every artwork will use all the principles. Some might just use 3, 2, or 5 of them. But yeah, in this case, I do see that it is asymmetrical and it is proportion. And I will go over what proportion is later. And it is pretty balanced. It even has repeating shapes. I can even see there's subtle emphasis It can be the interesting shape around the belt area. I would say that my eyes are somewhat gravitating towards the waist area. The focal point could be also this here. I see it at the center, but I think to provide more of a focal point, this artwork would be better if this here is bigger. This thing on his belt could be a little bigger. It could probably be a little bit lighter so you could see a little bit more emphasis. But overall, I think this piece is pretty good. And then we have this God of War scene here. This is pretty balanced. If you look in this side and compare to this side, since we have it looks like an orb, some kind of magical thing that really lights up. So we have this bright element here, and then we also have this torch that provides a little bit more lighter tone in this scene. And then if you look on this side, we do have some heavier elements here, and this area is not as bright as this, but it still nonetheless provides balance because we have something a little bit heavier here, and then we do have a little bit of brightness of the light illuminating here. Now, if you just imagine, okay, let me just go back to my history. All right, so if you guys just imagine, if this right here, this big circular magical orb thing, if this was larger, right? If this was larger, and let me go to my erase tool, and if I just gonna erase this here. But imagine if this is like really, really large, right? This will throw the entire piece off balance. So that means that this part here will now be too heavy compared to this side here. And if we have something like that, it kind of makes our eye feel a little bit uneasy. So providing a little bit of balance in the artwork is what's going to make the piece a lot more pleasing. So if I go ahead and open this here, okay, so back to its original piece. So this is very nice, very balanced work, and it also has some asymmetrical forms here because what you see on one side is not completely identical as the other side. And I like how this artwork is actually allow us to really move our eye around. There's a little bit of movement there, and we kind of see that it wants to lead us onto the actual entrance of the place here in the middle, which I think this is going to be more of the focal point. It takes our eyes to that specific area. When we look at this piece, we're looking at every part of the scene, but at the same time, because of the way this is constructed, our eyes cannot help but gravitate toward the entrance of this mysterious home or a building at the back. Yeah, I think that's pretty cool. Principle is pretty much on point. If we want to look at an artwork, if we want an artwork that is good, that provides stability, that really doesn't create any tension, that doesn't really make our viewers' eyes uneasy, then having a balanced work is very, very essential. Repetition. This is a principle of design that refers to one object or shape being repeated. It creates unity within the work of art. Alright, so looking at some examples of work that shows repetition. This right here, I found it in ArtStation. So if you guys want to check out her work, very amazing artist. Her name is Jocelyn Zelder. So check that out. But this right here, you could see, if I kind of zoom in, there's some repetition of interesting shapes here. If we look at the Batman emblem, we know that we have this shape right here. Now, thinking of this particular shape, it repeats all across the head, the torso, the legs, Yeah, repeats everywhere here. All right, so it doesn't just stay on the chest. So we do see that emblem here. But if you look, we have somewhat of that repetition going across that type of shape that they have just shown you right there. And we even have that shape right here, which is very nice, even though it's subtle, but it is there. Very effective repetition going on. Even on the equipment that we have here on the lower arm, we kind of have that shape going on. It may be just a tad bit different, but it still has a very similar shape. Having this repetition of shape really provides a sense of movement to the art piece, a pure sense of rhythm. And then we also have it right here on the leg area. So right here, it could even be, if you look at it from upside down, we kind of have that kind of shape going. So very nice repetition being implemented on this art piece. All right, and if we look at Scorpion, if we look at the shape here, we have this kind of rectangular shape going. Okay, so we see that there. And if we scroll down, we also kind of see that shape right here, the exact same shape. So we have that, we have this shape right here. And I would even say around his face is kind of similar. Kind of have that shape, but just rounder. And also, if you look at his armor, we kind of have a similar type of silhouette for the armor here. And it's not just the shape that could provide unity to your work. It could also be the color. So we have yellow here, yellow on the torso. So it's not just we have yellow on the upper body and all of a sudden the yellow color disappear in the lower body. So that yellow color appears everywhere on the head, torso, and also on the lower leg, on the feet. Even on the feet, very small amount of yellow, but it is there, which unifies everything for the Scorpion costume. Contrast. This refers to differences in values, colors, textures, and shapes. This principle prevents a monotonousness in artwork. Okay, so what contrast really does is it allows us to distinguish an object from an object. It helps us tell a much clearer story and allows the viewers to see exactly what is happening. Looking at this character here, we could see that there are different types of contrast that we could look at. We have right here, we got a really dark value here. We have a dark tone, and then we have a light value, which is the yellow part. That will allow us to distinguish the strap from the body of our character Bowser here. So this creates contrast if you have a different type of values. You have lighter color mixed with a darker tone color, and then that provides a different variety of tonality to your artwork. And one way to see if you have really good contrast with your work is making it seeing things in black and white. So if I go and add an effect here that would make this black and white, yeah, we could see that we have dark tone. We can see here that we have dark tone, and then we have mid tone, and then we have light tone. So having different variety of tones will bring some contrast to your art piece. But let's imagine that, let's say, for the bracelet here, for our Bowser, let's say that instead of that being black, that it's gray instead, right? And then we visualize this in black and white. Now we lose the contrast that distinguish the bracelet here from the body of the character. So by making sure that we have a variety of tones here, we have dark tones, mid tones, and light tones, it will allow us to see what is happening to our artwork a lot clearer. What it does is it allows the viewers to see exactly what the situation is for the art piece, what is happening in the art piece. And we look at another artwork here, the Skyrim environment. We do see a variety of tones here also. So we could see that we have some lighter tones that come from the snow-filled tree here. We got the snow that really brings some brightness to our scene. And then we have also, we got some mid-tones on our scene here, mid-tones. And then we also have some darker tones that provide some nice contrast to our overall piece. So yeah, contrast is very important because it allows us to have a much more variance to the art piece. It creates unity and it draws the viewer's eye into the painting and helps to guide the viewer around the artwork. Proportion. This is when all parts relate well with each other. This refers to the size of the objects or the human figure. Okay, so look in this artwork here. We could see how everything in this scene really makes sense because of its use of proportion. So we could see that there's a person here. So maybe average size of that person. Average male height is about 5'9". Right, so let's say it's about 5'9", this guy. And so we could see that the building is taller than him. So that's probably about 14 feet high. And then we have this nice monument or some kind of large statue there that makes it really, really pop out. The thing about proportion is the proportion can signal what is important in a design and what isn't. The larger elements, like this here, the larger elements can be more important and the smaller elements can be less important depending on the purpose. Proportion is one of the easier principles of design. Simply explained, it is the size of the elements in relation to each other, and it could be used to further define what is the purpose of your art, and it also tells a story, just how your objects in regards to height, width, and length relative to each other conveys an imaginary or realistic event in your artwork. And if we look at this here, if you are creating a character, proportion is very important. And depending on the type of character that you want, then you're going to have to adhere to the rule of the standard human proportion. If the character is a normal person, most likely you're going to have 7.5 heads high. If the person is more of a basketball player or a model, they're going to be either idealistic, 8 heads high, or 8.5 heads high. Now, if they're going to be out of this world, more like somebody that you'll see in Street Fighter in a video game, a big strong warrior is going to be more heroic. Or if one of those World of Warcraft orc, they're 9 heads high. And the way you would do this if you are doing a character in 3D is you would first look at the head here. What I would do to measure this so that everything is proportioned is I would select the head here, right? Yeah, just making sure. Alright, so selecting these. And a way for you to determine if this is proportion is you could go ahead and make a copy of this head. And let's say you are going for something that is more normal. So that's going to be 7.5 heads high. What you would do is you would go ahead and make a copy. Let's say I want to just make 7 copies of these. All right, so I have here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then it has to be 7.5. All right, so I could make him larger. Oh, actually, this is fine. I just need to kind of move this down and then make it larger like that. And based on this, what you could do is you could check out your guide here. What you should have is the first head should align. It should be from the top of the head onto the bottom of the chin. And then the second head is going to be from the chin onto the nipple area. And then the third head is going to be from the nipple area onto the navel area. And then the fourth head is going to be from the navel area onto the pubic area. And then the fifth head is going to be from that pubic area onto just right above the knee. And then the sixth head here is going to be right about from here onto right below the knee area. And then the seventh head is going to be from right below the knee area onto just right on the shin. And then the last part is going to be just half a head onto the feet, bottom of the feet. And so now we have 7.5 heads high. This will be really good if you are doing a character to make sure that everything is proportioned. And when you are doing stuff in 3D, you will basically have your units where you're able to adjust. You're basically going to have your units here where you're able to adjust your setup. So right now I have it in feet. So another way to do this to make sure everything is proportioned is what some artists do is they create a proportioned human body as something that's 100% proportion. And then what they would do is they would use that as a reference. And when they create a building or a house, everything should be relative to that size if you want the big building. And also you could check the height of your size for your 3D object to make sure everything is proportioned. These techniques will help you when you want to create something that is more believable. Having a scale, using it in art, it describes the size of the object, and it just naturally provides the human eye a sense of comfort. When we look at something that's proportioned, it gives us a much more pleasing feeling when we look at it. Applying this principle of design allows us to feel more secure when we view things that are more accurately relative to each other. Alright guys, so now you know how important it is to understand the principles of design, because not only it makes your art visually appealing, but it also communicates your message. Now, before I leave you off with the stuff that we have learned here, I have found this photo online, and this artwork right here, all of the principles of design has been applied to this artwork. And I want to go over with you guys those 6 principles and how they are implemented here. That way, when you are browsing online and you are studying the principles of design, you kind of understand how a specific artwork becomes so great. And you don't have to use not all of the artwork there that are really good not every artwork have to have all of the principles assigned to them. Remember that. You could just have 3 of the principles applied or 4 of the principles applied to make it effective. But in this case here, I have studied these, and all of the principles that I have mentioned have been applied here. Okay, so I want to go over with you guys. So first things first is going to be the emphasis. So when we are looking at this character art, the first thing that you will probably notice is this emblem. You can see that this is the focal point because you see the light blue piercing. I believe these are jewels on there on the emblem, but it's really, really noticeable. It just captures your attention. And so this is the focal point of the artwork. Another thing that's been applied here, another principle, is going to be the asymmetry principle. So we see on this side that we have an armor. Okay, so we only have it on one side. And if you look at the bottom part of the character, we have this green type of, could be made out of animal material, but it's kind of waving on this side. And then we have another one, which is in brown, kind of going this way. And this gives it some asymmetrical look to it, a little bit of interest, so it's not exactly the same on both sides. And we also have this here, this fabric that is dripping just on one side here. And then we also have that, but it's not in the same placement. We kind of have it a little bit farther out on the kind of more on the hip area rather on the front. So that, but just by changing the position of the object, it gives that asymmetrical feel to it, which definitely gives more variance to the overall art piece. And another thing is going to be, if you look at the belt area here, you can see that we have this element, which we don't really see on this side. So when you're thinking of asymmetry, it could just be the object's placement. It could be the actual shape of it that's been changed. It could be the color. It could be the contrast that could give it asymmetry. But yeah, this asymmetrical areas is what's really going to make the character looks a lot more interesting. Now, this character also show balance because we have this armor right here on this side, okay? But if you look here, by adding this X on this side of the character, it makes it completely balanced where this part where we have the shoulder armor is not making this side look heavy because we have this heavy X that we are looking at that gives this side a little more weight. And so now, if we look here, everything look like it's just balanced at the center. So imagine if we don't have the armor here and then the character artist just implemented the drawing of the X here, then this side will just be a little too heavy, all right? And so when creating something, you have to think about how everything could be balanced. That way, our eyes are going to be a little bit more comfortable. When we are looking at it, it's going to be easier for us. Another thing is repetition. If you look at the things that are, the objects that are repeating here, there are actually a few of them here that are repeating. So if you think of this sharp object here, it looks like a long pointed tooth. So that is repeating all throughout the character, okay? So you see it on the upper body, you see it on the arm area here, you see it on the middle part of the body, and you also see it on the lower leg area. All right. So this provides repetition and harmony, but that's not the only thing that repeats. If you look, there's this bony, it looks like I would say it looks more like a finger bone or digits. So that right there is also repeating. So all this bony elements I would say these are more like the bones. Even this right here, it could look like part of the bony tissue, the material. You could see that repeating on there all throughout the body that unifies the character as a whole. And it's not just the object, it's also the color. If you look, we have this nice greenish, desaturated greenish color. And I'm going to go ahead and increase the brightness of this so you can see a little better. But yeah, if you guys look here, we do see, I'm going to change the color. So we see there's a little bit of desaturated green, kind of look like army green. So we see it on the armor here, we see it on the skirt area, and we also see it right here on the straps, and we also see it right there on the shoe. So a little bit of that is applied even on the axe area. So the artist did not apply just green on the top of the body, but he applied it smartly all throughout the body, which gives it a nice harmony. And also the golden hair, he has a golden hair, but you could also see the golden area all throughout from the top onto the bottom. The gold doesn't just fade out, it spreads all throughout the art piece. So that right there just definitely provides unity to the character. So that right there is repetition, guys. Another thing here is contrast. So if we take a look at this in black and white, all right, so we do see some dark tones. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and create a new layer here. We see some darker tones here, dark tones there, and we also see some lighter tones like on the metal part and also the bones. You can see those are the lighter areas. And then we also see some of the mid-tone color. You got mid-tone, which is the skin tone of the character. It's more in the mid-range value. But looking at this in black and white, we could see that there's definitely variance of tonality in here that provides more interest to our piece, to the piece here. And this having a variety of tones definitely make the character more contrasted. And last but not least is proportion. And indeed, this is definitely proportion, because if you look at the character, this is definitely going on this is more the 7.5 heads, going to the 7.5 heads high. Normal character. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.5. So this character art is going more towards the normal average size person, and so which is fine. A barbarian warrior, and he still looks powerful even though he's an average size. He's tough, and everything here for this guy is definitely proportion, as you can see there. So that is how everything is applied here. And as I mentioned before, you don't have to have all the principles applied to an artwork when you're doing an environment, if you're doing a character. Not every single principle have to be applied to make it look amazing, especially if you know how to break the rules properly. But just understanding those principles of design and how they could be implemented, and then just being aware of those principles will allow you to create better artwork that will make sense and that will stand out, that will make your work look better than the rest. And when you truly understand the 6 principles of design and you observe and study other people's artwork, and you're going to be able to see why those artwork are one of the best, because you're able to identify and review those principles that's been added on there. And yeah, and I hope that this helps you guys out with creating your artwork in the future, with creating your environment, with creating your character design. And yeah, and I hope you guys enjoy this.